So what is Batman? Batman is the symbol of vengeance, but there's a transformation to what Batman is. From vengeance to service. That's really what this movie becomes. Those are very classic Batman tropes, but there's a new take on it. The biggest thing for me is this deeper sense of transformation that Bruce Wayne / Batman undergoes. There are a lot of things that stay the same for a Batman film. The stories are usually the same, characters are usually the same, and the thing that really changes the tide of a Batman movie or any superhero movie that has various directors or interpretations is to look at the leading actors and then to look at the direction, the director. You know, where is the director taking this new interpretation? And at this point, you kind of have to have an interpretation to the film. You can't just make another Batman film. Now you have to reinterpret what the characters mean, what they live for, what their desires are. You have to reinterpret the visuals of the world in order to have a successful film. And the performances are a big part of what carries that direction for the director. How are we going to execute or elevate this idea? Matt Reeves seems to have taken the film to a very classic noir feel. All of the Batman films have had a noir feeling to them. You know, Batman inherently has a noir feel to it. You know, you have a vigilante, there's always detective work, and you're dealing with characters that are complex and quite tortured. And all of those things are really part of what helps build a good noir. The way they shot it, not just the style, but the way they shot it was very classic. Even the performances had an exaggerated stylishness to them. For a lot of the smaller characters had these big bravado moments. It's a specific style of performance. The performance understands that it's a performance. But when you juxtapose these smaller characters who are very big and very vibrant, and you kind of put that up against Robert Pattinson, who really plays the role quietly. He's not this heroic figure. He's a tortured person who pushes himself to do things that he thinks are good. He's not trying to be heroic. He's just trying to do the right thing. And that's one of the main differences. Now let's talk about direction. That's one of the big differences with the different directions each of these Batman interpretations have taken. You had your Adam West Batman, very campy, not serious at all, almost like slapstick, you know. And then you transition that into something more Tim Burton, which is highly stylized. It's not meant to be real. It's meant to be this fantasy, this playland, you know, these big and loud and dark and interesting and funny comic books. That's what Tim Burton did, and he did it beautifully. You know, no one could have done what he did. Those are the ones I grew up on. You know, and then you have Christopher Nolan. Now you start taking this character and making him not only darker, but more complex philosophically and psychologically. And the Nolan films are perfect for that. You know, when you're watching the Nolan Batman films, you're getting a character who is almost more akin to Greek gods. The Nolan Batman films take Batman as more of an idea of heroism. He is almost like a godlike figure, you know, a savior. He is the Dark Knight, you know, where the Batman treats Batman like a human. They treat him like a person who chooses to do this, a person who apparently the cops tolerate because he is successful at doing specific things that aid them in their journey to protect and to serve, you know, to curb the drugs and the crime and all that. But ultimately, he's still just a dude in a suit, and they treat him that way. They call him a freak. You know, he's out in public. He is visibly seen. He's no longer hiding in shadows and using that to create a mythos about him. Batman is out in public. You see him. He's on the crime scene. He's more confrontational even because of that. The Batman treats Batman in a way that hasn't really been done before. Now let's talk a little bit about the story, because it's almost as if this story were written as a very classic noir story about cops and robbers and criminals and vigilantes. It is somewhat Batman driven. Batman becomes involved in an investigation of a serial killer targeting public figures and politicians. He's creating some kind of manifesto, and in this manifesto, he directs these murders, or at least requests the attention of Batman. He starts leaving envelopes and notes to Batman that lead him through some clues, which leads Batman down a rabbit hole of corruption to what is supposedly the origin of this corruption in the city of Gotham. But really, most Batman films, the plot and the story don't drive them. Most films are not driven by plot and story. Most films are driven by complex characters with wants and needs that sometimes contradict each other, creating internal conflict with the external world that prevents them from meeting their needs or wants. When you look at this film, the characters start to become symbols in and of themselves in relation to each other. And once you look at the characters as just symbols for bigger ideas, the movie is more of an art house film mixed with noir in a contemporary setting, speaking to a contemporary audience about a very specific problem in ourselves and in society. It's doing something very similar to what Joker did. Joker talked about current political strife that mirrored what happened in the 70s, a very similar climate in the 70s of New York. And this film is doing something very similar to that. It's talking about society. So this is one of the things I'm noticing too, is you have these more gritty, real DC films like Joker and the Batman, who they're not trying to take themselves seriously, but they are trying to say something about us, about the audience. They're trying to say something about what it means to be a human being. They're going deeper into the psychology and the social statements that a story can lend, especially a story of this caliber. You know, plug in your DC characters or even your Marvel characters if they were to do that, and you have a large audience experiencing these ideas. Now, and I think what they're doing is they're bringing bigger ideas to an audience. They're saying something to an audience. I mean, 2019 saw Joker talk about political strife and social schisms creating almost riots between the rich and the poor. And then what did you see in 2020 when Corona hit? You saw a huge unbalancing, not necessarily of rich and poor, but you saw this unbalancing and this clashing of just different values of people, different sides of the road of people. You know, these people, and there was a lot of fighting. There was so much going on that resembled Joker as a film. And I think that what the Batman is doing is something very similar. So the main ideas here are corruption and the way we look at service. Ultimately, we have the choice of whether or not we want to become corrupt or to not become corrupt. And there's a gang of kids all with their faces painted very similarly. But there's this one kid who has half of his face painted and the other half clean. And that's a very apparent symbol of this decision. I mean, this gang is going to an initiation of some kind. And this kid has a decision. Is he going to go all the way to one side or all the way to the other side? it's almost like he can't decide. He's scared to make a decision. And if you have a very clear idea of where you want to go, there should be no fear of your decision. Fear of what may come at the other side of the decision, yes, but not fear of the decision. If you know what your values are, you go to those values and you're not scared of making that choice. And this kid is scared. He doesn't know what to choose. He doesn't know if he should become corrupt, if he should go through with this initiation, or if he should run away even, or refuse to do it, or whatever. His face is unpainted. He is undecided. Perhaps it's this indecision that is worse. If he just made up his mind and decided to be corrupt or to be clean, that would be so much better for everybody, because now there's a clear enemy, or now there's a clear ally. But if you're undecided on what you want to do and you're playing both sides, then you just can't be trusted by anybody. As the initiation is going forward, and there's some passerby is being beat up, and they pass him to this kid like, okay, now you better do it if you want to be one of us. And he doesn't want to do it. He's not sure if he wants to do it. He hasn't made up his mind. He's undecided. And then Batman arrives. And it's this scene that made me realize that, oh, that's what's happening. Is the symbol of Batman is a symbol of someone. Batman saves this kid from having to make a choice. Think about that. What does that mean? Batman saves this kid from having to make a choice, assuming he was undecided. If he was decided and he was just scared of not following through, that's another thing. But what would Batman be if he were preventing us from making choices ourselves? Does he not think that we would make the correct choice? I don't know. That's an interesting question. I mean, Penguin is fully corrupt, and he doesn't care who knows it. He's very open about it. He makes fun of it. You have that side of the spectrum. You have the indecision. And then you have another side of the spectrum who is still quite corrupt from a moral or ethical perspective. They are acting in corruption for a greater good. I mean, you look at somebody like Selena Kyle. In this film, her character is corrupt. She's a thief. She goes around stealing things. And you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose? What is she serving? What is her symbol? And to me, her symbol is, she is the symbol of service to self. I think Robert Pattinson's performance shows a lot of reservation. He's not trying to be a big figure. He's trying to project what's internal more than anything. And it's almost like he doesn't want to go out there and fight people, but he feels like he has no choice. He must. If he wants his life to have any kind of meaning, that is what he must do. He must go out there and fight for those who don't or can't or haven't decided that they want to. There's a very specific line where he says, if I can't have an effect, I don't care what happens to me. He shows this apathy for himself. I don't care what happens to me. It's almost like he's so broken that, man, he doesn't even want to pretend in public. In the Christopher Nolan Batman films, Bruce Wayne was a playboy. He wanted attention. He wanted the girls. He wanted the money. Because it was his appearance, right? If he's this guy, then he can't be this hero. But this Bruce Wayne, the Matt Reeves, Robert Pattinson Bruce Wayne, it's almost like there's no difference from when he's Bruce and what he feels as Bruce to what he is and what he feels as Batman. It's really just taken to a level where he allows himself to be the most free. And that's one of the ideas that him and the Riddler talk about, is some people wear a mask to disguise themselves. And what Batman is doing is wearing his mask so that he can be the fullest version of himself. And the only way, it's almost as if the only way Batman can, or Bruce Wayne, the only way Bruce Wayne can at all make his life meaningful is to be of service to others. And that's the really big character transformation that happens when you watch the film. I mean, the very first line Batman says is, "I am vengeance." What is vengeance? Vengeance is, man, it's just anger. It's anger focused at a very specific target to get a very specific kind of satisfaction, and that is revenge. But this film takes the character of Batman on a different journey and what he becomes now. And there are even clips of him carrying people out of danger, almost like a Superman. And what Batman becomes, what Bruce Wayne decides, is Batman is no longer of vengeance. He's not going to just tear down those who have torn him down. He is going to work to build others up. He's going to protect others. He's going to save others. He's going to integrate into people's lives to make that a better place. He is going to be a service to others. We've never seen that before. We've always seen the character lurking in the shadows, or when Batman arrives, people scatter. We've never seen somebody so focused on this kind of integration. The way Pattinson plays it, he's not calling that attention. He doesn't want to be noticed. Batman is not something he wants to do. It is an affliction. And the most vulnerable scene, the most beautiful scene, is the confrontation between the Riddler and Batman. And as Paul Dano is giving his monologue to Batman, you see Bruce Wayne dressed up in a suit. You don't see Batman. You see a Batman who's incredibly vulnerable. And a Batman who looks as if he feels exposed. And you've never seen Batman like that before. You've never seen that before. There was one moment in particular that solidified the idea of this film having a very contemporary and societal statement behind it. And it has to do with one shot, where the shot was, and the soundtrack. This is the end of Act 1. Batman shows up to the investigation of a murder of the mayor. And there's a note for him. And just as the scene is ending, the police tell Batman that the mayor's child is the one who found the mayor dead. Now immediately, we have Batman, who is an orphan, looking directly at this now orphaned child, or this child whose father has been killed, and who saw it, just like Batman, just like Bruce Wayne. You know, he's identifying with this child. The song from Nirvana, "Something in the Way," begins. Just as Batman turns his gaze, looks down the barrel of the camera lens, and holds it for what must have been, about 5 seconds. And Robert Pattinson looks directly into the camera with a face that has 1,000 words behind it, and a choice by a director that has 1,000,000 words behind it. And the most basic words were, "This film is talking to you. I am talking to you." So what this film is saying now has a very poignant and focused direction. And that's at us, at who we are, at what we are doing. So now all of the themes, all of the ideas the characters, the symbols of the characters now have a direct relationship to who we are and what we're going through. And they solidify that idea by using a lot of what we use today. Phone conversations, vertical videos. I mean, this movie feels so real because these characters are living in a very contemporary time, using the terms we use as a society. As Americans, perhaps. Perhaps it's talking as Americans. The corruption of America. Maybe it's just the corruption of ourselves. There's a call to action. And the call to action of this film comes from the transformation of Bruce Wayne and Batman. And that is the transformation of living for vengeance, which is ultimately serving yourself, to living for service. And that is living for others. And it makes you wonder, in what way can we find ourselves corrupt? Are we similar to Batman in that we are corrupt by anger, sadness, loneliness? Are we corrupt like Penguin? No shame. Yeah, I'm bad. I do things for myself. I want this, this, and this, and I don't mind doing anything to get it. Or are we perhaps Jeffrey Wright? And we are corrupt in that we are facilitating a immoral behavior for the greater good, which can be termed as corrupt. I mean, how far corrupt are we? And what comes of our corruption? Maybe that's what the movie's about, is that there's almost no way of getting around being corrupt. It's almost like you have to become corrupt to do anything about the corruption. And where DC is becoming more complex, much deeper in their character and their ideas underlying the film, the story and the plot, Marvel continues to make these films that are roller coasters, more fun, more about the ride of a really cool story with really fun characters and, humor and all these wonderful things that you can't say you don't like it. It's a fun time to watch a Marvel film. But if you want to watch something deeper, I think that's what DC is really pushing, especially with a character as complex as Batman and Joker. I mean, those are incredibly complex characters. In the same way the Joker was talking about where we are going, I think the Batman is talking about where we are and perhaps what we can do to find a way out of that. And perhaps that is the transformation that Batman undergoes. Because that's the choice. Catwoman even tells him, let's go away together. Let's go do the things we want to do. Service to self. And Batman tells her to go. You go do that and serve yourself. I'm going to stay here, and I've made a choice to sacrifice my life, to make my life meaningful for others, the service to others. And maybe that's the choice we need to make as people to get ourselves out of this corrupt world that we've decided for ourselves. And ultimately, that's another message of the film. A lot of the actions made 20, 30 years prior to the events of this film created the environment that this film finds itself in, this environment of corruption and serial killers murdering for manifesto and vigilantes running the streets and nobody feeling safe and fear, and all of these negative things came about because of decisions that were made decades ago. And really that's kind of where we find ourselves also. We find ourselves in a situation let's not go there. Even as humans, what we have decided in the past will and are coming back to our present. If you don't find a way to resolve those, they're never going to escape you, and things are just going to keep getting darker and darker and more ghoulish and scary. And maybe sometimes our actions need to become corrupt to find a way out of what we've done. Yeah, thanks for watching.